So I joined Astellas 5 years ago in 2019. And it was very simple. A lot of my life has been spent in emerging markets. So I spent 8 years in Latin America. I spent 10 years in Asia. And Astellas approached me to say, would you like to build a new commercial region, which essentially is the emerging markets region at Astellas? We call it international markets. And I thought, oh, that would be absolute fun. So I've never built a region before, right? So that's when I said, yes, I absolutely top on that. And I spent 2.5 years building up that region. So I was employee number 1 of the region. And I think we're now a team of 50 people or so in the regional office in Singapore. We have affiliates across the world. We have strategy. We have clear direction. So yes, very much enjoyed my time at Astellas so far, and not only building that region, but then also the subsequent roles, including my current role as Chief Commercial Officer, which I've held for 1.5 years. You know, EFPIA is an industry association, right? So as an industry association, the members vote for members of the board of EFPIA to represent the company members or the associations, the national associations that are members of the European Federation of Pharma Industry Associations, which is what EFPIA stands for. So Astellas has a seat on the board, and I took that seat for Astellas as a member of the board when I took on the European presidency at Astellas in 2022. That's when I became board member. I've been, I believe, quite active, talking to parliamentarians and members of the European Commission and members of member states when I go and visit the different affiliates. I usually also make a point to try to talk to members of the Ministry of Health and really have a productive exchange of ideas on what does it take to bring value to patients, because I truly believe that pharma as an industry is one of the innovation drivers in the world. I mean, if you look at the percentage of our sales that we spend on R&D, it's higher than the car industry, it's higher than the software industry. We're really one of the innovation engines in the world, yeah? And that should be recognized, right? And it should be facilitated on the side of policymakers so that we actually can bring those innovations to the doctors that treat patients, because there's no use developing something if it then sits in the corner and no one has access to it. Yeah, and we do have significant access issues, not only in Europe, but also particularly in Europe, to get innovations into the hands of doctors and treating patients to improve their lives. So one fact in Europe, of course, is that while we have one agency that regulates the approval of medicines, the European Medicines Agency, we do not have one agency that regulates the reimbursement of medicines. Now, as you can imagine, without reimbursement, the majority of the population does not really have access to a medicine. Yeah, the private pay part of any population in the world would be very small. So you need the reimbursement mechanisms for the majority of patients to be able to be prescribed an innovative treatment. Yeah. Now picture the European Union. We have 27 member states. That means we have 27 national health systems, 27 authorities that govern the reimbursement criteria. In some countries that even devolves down, such in Spain and Italy, down to the regional level. So you have all these authorities involved in determining the reimbursement of an innovative medicine. That creates two issues. One is it takes time. And if you look at the weight index, so WAIT is an index of how long it takes in Europe on average from the minute medicine is approved to the time it is reimbursed. Yeah. And on average, it takes, I think, 500 days or something between approval and reimbursement. That's more than a year that patients are waiting to access an innovative treatment, are not able to do that because they're not able to pay for it, and there's no the official reimbursement mechanism has not been put into place. That is a very, very long time if you compare it to other geographies like let's say the United States or Japan or China, which are equally large markets. So you have the problem of the fragmentation of the European reimbursement landscape into national authorities. These national authorities have their own criteria. They demand different data. So you have to, as an industry, collect different data sets to satisfy Germany different from France, and France different from Italy, and Italy different from Romania, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a burden on data collection, and it's just a time element that makes reimbursement in Europe not a very efficient process. And it's the patient really that pays the price by not being able to be treated in the best possible way. Yeah. So what we see, for instance, in clinical trials, clinical trials have, Europe used to be quite competitive in clinical trials. That has faded dramatically in the last 20 years, and we see clinical trials shifting more to the United States and to China. Yeah, for ease of regulation and access to patients and speed to get to recruit patients in different disease areas. Yeah, so the regulatory burden that Europe has placed on our industry tends to be higher and or slower than competitive geographies. And then, of course, as an enterprise, you make choices and you say, well, why should I perform this research or this development in Europe if Europe doesn't give me access to a database, or if Europe makes it slow for me to be able to start up a trial, or every hurdle is a deterrent from investment in Europe. And we used to be pretty much at par with the United States in terms of investment in R&D in the healthcare industry. We now have a tremendous gap that has opened up in the last 20 years because the investment growth in the US has been just so much faster than in Europe. So I really would appeal to policymakers, to parliamentarians, to governments, to Ursula von der Leyen as the new, with the new mandate of her recent election as head of the European Commission, to think about the competitiveness of Europe, in this context. And I'm very pleased to see how Ms. von der Leyen has put competitiveness into her speech in front of the European Parliament to say, we need to make this a priority. I absolutely agree with her on that count, right? Now, the devil is always in the detail. When there's a will to become competitive, that's great. But when I look at the current European General Pharma legislation that was tabled last year and voted upon by the Parliament in April, I believe it was, I'm not quite sure that makes the cut, if I may say so, right? Because rather than increasing incentives such as the regulatory protection for new medicines in Europe, it actually decreases them. So, I think there's still work to do to translate the competitiveness agenda from Ursula von der Leyen into practice, into legislation, into real tangible benefits that would bring R&D R&D investment back to Europe. Yeah? We clearly have the scientists, we clearly have the know-how, we have the smart people, but we need the environment and the shaping of the environment so that the investment also comes into this continent. I think there are a few key areas. So one I already touched on, which is the so-called regulatory protection, right? So you have to imagine if you are an industry that spends on average 10 years or so doing trials on a new molecule or on a new treatment, every data set that you collect is private. It belongs to you as a company. Yeah? Now, the minute you give that data set to an authority for evaluation, the authority guarantees that data set to be protected. So the authority guarantees you this will not be put on the authority's website for everyone to copy. Yeah, because you spent 10 years, investigating this, and you say, look, authority, I'm only going to give this to you if you also grant me some protection of the data that I have. Of course, that protection is time limited, just as patents are time limited, right? And rightfully so. I think the public has a right to say, you don't have a right to your own data forever. Yeah, that would not be appropriate. But there is a timing element where the authority then says, I give you data protection for, currently in Europe, it's 8 years. Yeah, the proposal of the pharma legislation actually wants to reduce that. Now, I ask you, how would you feel if someone said to you, I am reducing the incentive of protection, even though I know you're spending 10 years on average to do all this investigation into safety and efficacy of medicines. If I reduce your protection, it means, generics can copy your data at an earlier stage. How does that work in terms of making Europe more competitive, making Europe more attractive for investment, if you're reducing at the same time the regulatory protection period that is granted to an innovative molecule, right? So it runs counter to the competitiveness agenda that Ursula von der Leyen has formulated. So I would really, the legislation currently is with the member states. It's been voted upon by Parliament, by European Parliament. It's now up to the member states to recommend amendments. I would strongly urge member states to actually consider extending the protection period rather than cutting it, because that is what then draws R&D investment into Europe. So I would that's probably I would say the biggest cornerstone that we can think of. The other cornerstone, again, is regulation. If you look at how long the European Medicines Agency takes to evaluate a dossier, it's roughly 2 times as lengthy a process as the FDA takes in the US. So again, if you think of the regulatory approval period, then this famous weight index in terms of access approval period, the more you can shorten those review periods from authorities on approval dossiers and then reimbursement dossiers, the more attractive you will make the continent to bringing medicines to patients and then to doing the studies in this continent. So, it's all a question of how much burden do you place and how much incentives do you offer. Yeah, and if that is out of balance, as I feel it is today, then you will drive industry away rather than attracting it to European study sites and clinical centers. We offer our research, our know-how, we offer facts. There's some very good data points that EFPIA has gathered. There are studies that have been commissioned to evaluate parts of the legislation, and we offer that. And we go to the European Commission, the so-called DG Santé, so the Health Commission, and say, let's discuss these points. And we go to member states, to the governments. And I've been in touch myself with ministers from the Irish government, right? Because we just announced the investment in a new manufacturing facility there. So I was in touch with those, both parliamentarians and ministers from the Irish government. So we had very constructive conversations on, okay, so what does it take, right, for investment to come? Why is Astellas now making an investment into an Irish site for a new state-of-the-art manufacturing? And what made Ireland attractive in that decision? And is that still true for the future or not? Yeah, so those are the types of I wouldn't call them negotiations. I would call them really exchange of ideas and perspectives, where we say, look, this is what we are subject to, and if you can tweak this, then our life gets a lot easier in terms of deciding for Europe as either a manufacturing site or as an R&D site, right? And equally, the Macron government has made has tried initiatives to make R&D ventures more attractive in Europe. So those are the things where we say, reduce the regulatory burden, shorten timelines, make access more attractive, and then you will see investment flow into clinical trials and other research and development initiatives in Europe. Look, it's a question whether you want to attract innovation. You can treat 98% of all diseases with generics nowadays. Yeah, it's the 2% of diseases which afflict patients where we just don't have good medicines today. Yeah, and if you say, as the European healthcare systems all across Europe say, we want innovation because it gives patients a better life. Yeah, we as governments want to give patients innovative medicines because it helps treat diseases with a high unmet medical need. If that is true, then the environment also needs to be shaped into that in that direction. There are governments in emerging countries, as we talked about. I worked in emerging countries for a long time. There are governments which simply say, look, I'm not in the business of innovative treatments. I provide generics, and everything else is something the private person will have to decide. That's not something I've ever heard in Europe. Yeah, so that's where I think you need to walk the talk. If you say, I want innovation, then you also need to think about what's the environment for innovation, what's the access to innovation, what are the incentives for innovation, and how do we bring innovations to patients. Otherwise, you will have to say, you know what, I've debated this with my government, and we actually don't want this. We want the cheap route, and then we fund generics and nothing else. Yeah. What I find Europe struggling with is it's neither one nor the other, right? So you're not good at a truly positive environment for innovation, but you're also not willing to tell the population that they're not going to get it, right? So it's sort of in between. It's a very unfortunate position, both for patients and for industry, to be in. So I have to say, Astellas has been in Ireland with manufacturing plants for, I think, 30 years. So we have a long history in the country. And of course, when you have a history in a country, you have a close contact also on the authority side, both at the local level and then at the national level, so that um, our experience with especially the local government in Kerry County in Tralee is that they are very keen to understand what does it take to run a manufacturing plant. And then we tell them, there are a number of obligations we have to submit to and we want to submit to. For instance, we want to operate in a sustainable way from an energy point of view. We want to produce clean water rather than polluted water, right? So all those criteria we want to meet, and we expend a lot of energy to meet that. But at the end of the day, we need that certificate and we need that stamp of approval. And we need, when we submit our data sheets, we need someone to look at that and say, yes, you complied. Now, if that is a speedy process, and if that is a process where maybe even new requirements are, we're given information on new requirements so that we can adapt our process to that. That's that give and take at a local level, which has been extremely good in our experience. And of course, was it good from day one? I wasn't there to tell you so, but it has grown over time, and there's a trust between the local government and us as a company. We employ highly skilled people in the local community. We employ people coming from the local university. So, we provide also opportunities to the community, and that is then also facilitated in a constructive way by the local government, saying, look, you need to watch out, these are the requirements you need to comply with in order to operate this, and then we can pay attention to that, right? So that has been an extremely positive experience over the last 30 years in with our two manufacturing plants in Ireland. And that's why our recent investment essentially is just down the road from one of our existing manufacturing plants, which makes many things, of course, a lot easier if you have the same municipality and the same government dealing with two different plants. They will produce different molecules, but subject to the same set of regulations. It just makes it easier for us as a company to operate that way. Probably would look like a better solution to access than we have today. And it would look, I would be looking very much forward to an intense dialogue between the European Commission under Ursula von der Leyen or future Commission presidents and the industry to really have a discussion on what is hampering access today. So what is getting in the way? Because I truly believe that if we join forces and if we have an open and constructive discussion based on trust, not on ideology, but based on trust, trusting that the other side is trying to do the best, I think if we join forces, we can find solution. I'm a big believer that, they're intelligent people in industry. They're also very intelligent people in policy. And if we join forces, it must be possible that we find a better solution for patients in the European Union and the different member states. So, but without that dialogue, I struggle how that's going to work. And if the dialogue is hinted by ideological considerations where you're just trying to put down your party line, that's also not very helpful. So I'm really looking for that open, open-ended almost dialogue where we say, let's search for a solution that in the end satisfies the policy side as well as the industry interests. And let's have that open dialogue of what's hindering innovation and innovation investment in Europe today, and how can we remove those hurdles together. I think that would be a fantastic process to embark on.